This is Reidsville Chamber of Commerce News and Views, a business resource show with a focus on enhancing the business environment through advocacy, mentoring, and education in an effort to promote economic growth. The Reidsville Chamber of Commerce is a membership organization in North Carolina, working on behalf of its members for the betterment of the community. With Chamber of Commerce News and Views you can use, here's Chamber President Diane Sawyer.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Reidsville Chamber of Commerce News and Views show. I'm Diane Sawyer with the Reidsville Chamber of Commerce and Visitor Center, and today I am just over the top excited about one of my favorite people in Reidsville, and we have got the Chief of Police, Robert Hassell, with us today. Welcome to the show, Chief.
Thank you for the invite.
I love being able to talk to you about our community because you are so passionate about your job and what you do and protecting our citizens, and I'm very appreciative of all your initiatives. One of the things that we're going to talk about today, which is probably one of the darker subjects that we discuss sometimes, is the opioid crisis here in Reidsville and in Rockingham County. So tell us, Chief, a little bit about how it affects our community as a whole, and specifically for me, I also like to know how it's affecting our business community.
Yeah, good question. You know, right now, I think on the forefront of many of our citizens' minds is the COVID-19, the COVID pandemic. But for me in law enforcement, yes, that's at the top of the forefront of my mind and how we react, how we respond to things. But still, the opioid crisis is still a prevalent thing in our community, not just in Reidsville, but Rockingham County, our state, our country. And when you look at it, and I'm thinking and contemplating how to respond to your question, how it affects our community and how it affects our businesses. I'm gonna start with our businesses. And you think about someone who may be experiencing some kind of an addiction, whether it's opioid or some other kind of drug. How does it affect our business owners? Well, it affects in many ways. You know, missed work hours. Possibly individuals doing drugs or some other kind of use of an opioid or another kind of drug on the job, decreased job performance, near misses, accidents on the job, or near miss injuries or accidents that employers have to deal with, all because of possibly opioid addiction or some other kind of drug addiction. And this is coming from a survey that was done by the National Safety Council a couple of years ago, that 70% of employers state that opioids affect their workplace. And those are the areas for those employers that are experiencing the opioid crisis in the workplace. Those are the things they're seeing, those missed work hours, drug use on the clock, on the time. Job performance is decreasing, and near miss accidents. And of course, if they have an accident, look at the lost man hours from that. Then you look at it from our community as a whole. How is the opioid crisis affecting us? First off, I'd like to say from 1999 to 2016 is the most recent numbers I could find. In North Carolina alone, 12,000 North Carolinians have died from opioid-related overdoses. 12,000 in that time period from 99 to 2016. And that number have increased since 2016. You look at it from the standpoint of, a country, $78.5 billion a year, including the cost. That includes healthcare, loss of productivity, addiction treatment. And if you think about it, at least what I'm seeing in many of these cases of opioid addiction, many of those individuals who are suffering from addiction don't have health care. They don't have insurance that will help pay for them getting the needed services from a treatment provider. So now they're having to try to find funds from loved ones or family members, or either coming off Medicaid or other kind of services, which comes from Medicaid, from our community, from society, having to supplement and take care of getting those services to these individuals. So that's kind of where I'm seeing from the business standpoint, how it affects our businesses in our community, not just Reidsville, but other business communities across our country. but then how it affects our community as a whole. And not even to mention the response that our public safety responders, having to respond to those who are suffering from addiction. And many times for us, it is when it is to the extreme of an overdose, sometimes a near-miss death situation, and sometimes death.
So tell me about, I know that there has been some numbers presented and data given, and that's something that there's a task force. There are people working on the opioid crisis across the county. There's several different agencies involved, but I know you have statistics. Tell us about how Reidsville compares to the rest of Rockingham County.
Yes, good question. The most current numbers as of October last month, Rockingham County have seen 220 overdoses. That's 220 countywide. Of those 220, now my numbers are a little bit more recent. As of today, Reidsville have seen 33 overdoses to date. So if you look at the overall number of 220 countywide as of early October, and then 33 of those are in Reidsville, that's only about 15%. So 15% of all overdoses in Rockingham County are from the actual city limits of Reidsville that our responders are having to deal with here in our community.
So if we're talking about, 33 is still a lot in that time frame. It's a small percentage, a very small percentage of the overall larger issue that we know Rockingham County has as a whole, as a county. But 33 is still a number that I know that you take seriously. So tell us about what you're doing as the Reidsville Police Department to help prevent these deaths. And because I'm sure you are, I know you're doing lots of great things. Tell us about those things that you're trying to do to help prevent it.
Thanks for that question, Diane. You're right. We are doing, I feel, very proactive things. And we've started this a few years ago. Back in 2017, we put some initiatives in place. But I want to just back up a little bit. And yes, even though we are 15% of that overall number, it's still serious. Because of those 33, this year alone, we have seen 4 deaths, 4 overdose-related deaths. And even one death is one death too many when we're talking about addiction. So we do take these numbers very seriously. We took them very seriously when we start seeing these numbers creep up back in 2016 and 17. So going back to the question, what are we doing? We looked at this back in 2016, 17. We come up with a 3-prong approach and a 3-prong proactive approach. And we looked at the immediate, short-term, and long-term initiatives that we wanted to do to try to combat the opioid crisis. Back in 2017, one of our immediate responses was Narcan. We wanted to make sure every officer, and through the help of EMS, our county partner, we were able to ensure that every officer in the Reidsville Police Department had Narcan. And what is Narcan? Narcan is that life-saving drug, that medicine that counteracts overdose situation someone's going through. And every police officer here in Reidsville, the Reidsville Police Department, have access to that in their car. So when we respond to an overdose, that officer, if he knows that's what he has or that's what she has, they can administer that nasal spray to that individual. And it is a spray that has, I feel confident about this, has saved numerous of lives. Because as I said earlier, we've had 4 deaths this year, and that is 4 deaths too many. So I am so thankful back in 2017, I, along with our EMS partners and other community partners, were able to make sure that our department had Narcan for each one of our officers. Well, also back in 2017, we immediately started looking at, as a remedial response, our numbers. Because at first, when we would get numbers, we saw overall county numbers, and then numbers were presented to us as Reidsville is by zip code. And we have a pretty substantial size zip code. And for many people like you and I, we know that there are many citizens who have an address that says Reidsville, but it's not in the actual city limits of Reidsville. So when we were seeing numbers initially, they were much larger. So we don't recall responding to that many calls in a given year. So we started fine-tuning our numbers, looking at GIS mapping, actual tracking the numbers ourselves to make sure we're getting an accurate picture of how many overdoses we're actually experiencing in Reidsville. So that was the first immediate thing. One, Narcan to our officers, then to enhance our data collection so we know exactly what we are experiencing here in the city of Reidsville. So that was very helpful. Then two, short-term. Short-term and immediate, but short-term. So in the short term, what we did was we created information packets. And because we wanted to make sure, we wanted to enhance awareness to the general public, but especially those who are experiencing addiction, what services are out there for them. So what happened was every officer that went to an overdose call, of course, the first priority was, giving aid to the individual. But once we give aid, we would leave that packet with the individual once they are in the clear, or we may leave it with them, we may leave it at their place of residence, or we may leave it with the loved one. And just for illustration, we created 4 packets, but this is the one packet, and it's titled Drug and Alcohol Services, which includes addiction, drug addiction. And in this packet, there was brochures from all of our service providers here in Rockingham County, Integrated Healthcare, Daymark, and others are in this packet. So that way the loved ones and the individuals themselves going through addiction know what services are out here that they can call to get help. That was highly, highly important to make sure we put that in place. Also under the short term, I'm very proud, but Reidsville has been teaching DARE in our schools. I remember DARE. Do you remember DARE, Diane?
I do remember DARE. I remember my DARE officer to this day, and when I see him, I know him by name. He's a retired police officer in our community, but I have very fond memories of him and the things that he taught us.
Yeah. And we have been teaching DARE for like 3 decades here in the city of Reidsville. And I am proud that we still teach it today. And I'm kind of digressing a little bit. I remember sometimes when I talk about DARE, some individuals say, yeah, I remember Sergeant Harrison was my DARE teacher. And I'm like, wow, that was Councilman Harrison now, but he taught DARE back when he was an officer way back here at the Reidsville Police Department. So it has been influential to many people's lives over the years, uncountless lives that children, teenagers, they knew the dangers of drug use and they stayed away. They knew the consequence and they stayed away from using drugs. So we've been teaching it for 3 decades. So what we want to do is when DARE International came out with a enhanced curriculum that included opioid addiction and abuse, we made sure we jumped on that and revised our curriculum to include that additional instruction time for our students in our middle school about the dangers of opioids. So we implemented that early on in late 17, 18, we implemented that. And matter of fact, it was on the news. One of the local TV stations in our region here covered it. One of our officers was able to talk about the curriculum and how we implemented it in our school. So that was also in the immediate action, or 3-pronged action that we took. Enhanced our data collection. Then we went immediately and enhanced our DARE program so that we can educate our children on the dangers and consequences of opioid use. Because what we find is many times our children, and not just our children, but even our loved ones, where are they getting these opioids? Where are they getting these drugs? These oxycodones and things, where are they getting it from? They're getting it from our homes. They're getting it from our medicine cabinets. They're getting it from our loved ones' medicine cabinets, maybe a grandparent or another loved one. So we wanted to talk about those consequences and dangers to our teenagers, so that way, hopefully, we can combat that early on at an earlier age that could create, positive habits and understanding, so they won't go down the wrong path in the future. Then we looked at the third prong, long term, and that's bringing us up current to 2000. We started thinking about this in 2019, but it started getting more traction and came to fruition in 2020. And that was the P.O.R.T team, or post-overdose response team. And earlier this year, late 2019, early 2020, we started having conversations with other community stakeholders and the Rockingham County Opioid Task Force. And I pretty much let the group know that I wanted to partner with some community partners, some service providers, and I wanted to bring a post-overdose response team to Reidsville. And we, along with the community service providers, worked hard. And as of July 1st of this year, the P.O.R.T team became active. And we now, since then, respond to every overdose within 48 to 72 hours after the overdose incident. So we made a commitment with each other as a group, collectively, that we want to do more than just pass out the packets. We want to do more than just education. We wanted to help families, because there are a lot of families suffering in our community and abroad in Rockingham County and elsewhere in our state and our country, who have loved ones who are suffering from this, and they may not know which direction to go. So we wanted to make sure we partner with our service provider, that when the overdose situation happens, we send the service provider and they respond to their address where they live or where they're staying, and we make sure they understand what services are available to them. So that's taking that extra step, reaching out a helping hand, letting them know that we're here for you, we care about you, and these services are for you. You just got to take that step, that leap forward and say, yes, I want help, or I need help, and then take advantage of that. So that 48 to 72 hour window is important. We don't go before 48 hours, but it's always within that 48 hour to 72 hour period. Studies have shown that if it's before 48 hours, it may not be as effective. So that 48 to 72 hour window is the most effective time to make that kind of contact with an individual who may be suffering from addiction. And we do that. And since we've been doing that, we've had a few individuals, a very small few, but even if it was just one, I find it a success that has taken that reach out for assistance and help. And they have taken advantage of that and have gotten into some kind of program with one of our service providers. So that's our three-pronged approach that we've taken here, the immediate, short-term, and long-term. And we're hoping, working with our stakeholders, we meet monthly, and our conversations have set our sights on possibly looking at taking this P.O.R.T team concept countywide, where it's not just what happened here in Reidsville, what happened in all our municipalities throughout our county.
As always, you have a thorough approach to a problem and several ways of going about solving it. And I am impressed with the ability to look at things from a perspective that it not only helps them by you responding to the call, but it helps them in the future so that you're not responding to them for a second call. Narcan is truly a really great thing to have. It is life-saving. I'm going to assume by the conversation that your officers and our other first responders have probably used that quite frequently, maybe?
Yes, our fire department, our EMS personnel, and our officers all have access to Narcan, and we all have used it at some point in our response to someone who is suffering or going through a moment of crisis of an overdose. And it has saved many individual lives. So I'm just so thankful that our department, along with other municipalities, have access to this life-saving drug to administer to individuals in our community.
I think that another thing that is important to talk about. You know, you talked about the different approaches and the different things, and one of the first things that you mentioned in the beginning was the pandemic. But, you know, we've seen the numbers during the pandemic. I know that you and I have talked separately. I know it's been reported multiple times that the domestic calls have gone up during the pandemic, but I would also assume that from the data, mental health is, you know, an ongoing and continuing to escalate issue. And we need more mental health resources. And as we're heading into the holidays and seasonal depression, and as the pandemic is raging on and the numbers are spiking, I imagine that all of these things tie together that could make the opioid crisis that much more prevalent over the course of the next several months. And I think that these things that you have put in place will help continue to keep it at a low in Reidsville, just from the things that you're already doing. You know, I appreciate you coming on to talk about these things. And I think that our businesses really struggle in general with productivity and time missed. And this is one of the biggest issues from that.
And, you know, and from the business perspective, you know, if they suspect drug use, I know, like, you know, if they suspect some kind of drug addiction or drug use, of course, the first thing is make sure if they have employee assistance programs, get these individuals help, you know, direct them in the right direction. So hopefully they can retain an employee after they get help and assistance. But, you know, it is something that's not just in our community, but it is prevalent in our businesses. And that's something they have to deal with. Just like we're dealing with it in our communities, because, you know, it's probably, I don't know if some of our viewers, wow, it's interesting to hear our police chief talking about post-overdose response teams and offering help and services to individuals. Well, I don't think that's surprising. At least it's not surprising for me as a practitioner. I look at, you know, yes, we are law enforcement, we're officers, or I like to call peace officers, and we look at the enforcement side of drug enforcement. And then we have an outstanding narcotics unit, and they do a very good job and an effective job in dealing with drugs in our communities. These individuals who are pushing these drugs in our communities, if we have information, then we're going to come after you. We're going to deal with that. But there's also that human side of me and my officers. And we have these individuals who are addicted to these drugs. And sometimes they're addicted no means of their own, where they are overly prescribed an opioid and they have become addicted to it, you know, and now that's things that we're having to deal with as a society. So, you know, yes, I want to look at what else can we do, because we're not going to arrest ourselves out of this issue. So we need to look at preventative, proactive steps. And the P.O.R.T team, I do believe, is doing that. That's helping us ensure they have the knowledge and understanding what services are here for them. We're just opening our hands, reaching our hand of help, assistance, and some have taken that help, and I'm so happy that they did. And hopefully they'll break that cycle of, you know, wanting to stop, but then they don't stop because the addiction is so strong. And hopefully getting them on these programs will help break that cycle and help them become productive citizens in society. That loved one that we remember, you know, we're approaching the holiday season. You know, Thanksgiving is here. You know, we want to help as many people as we can to get back to normal, that loved one that we all know. And this is the first step in doing that.
So many things that you just said that I kind of wanted to touch on. And one of the things that I think that speaks to me, and you were talking about going after the people in the community who are bringing the drugs in. But one of the things that I think is a struggle is that the opioid crisis is coming from what you said, being overprescribed, or people can get access to these drugs in their very own home, or that they've got kids who get access, or another loved one who lives with them who gets access. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of how that's part of the issue?
Yes, so drug enforcement, we're dealing with drug dealers, drug pushers, the drugs that's on the streets. We're dealing with that. But yes, many of our young people are getting the drugs from their homes. And there's two ways we try to raise awareness that you can help fight this. is we was one of the first municipalities in Rockingham County to get a drug drop box. Now I believe almost all our municipalities now have a drug drop box in their department. It's in the front lobby area of our building. You can bring those expired old drugs or drugs that you no longer need, opioids, anything, any drug, to the Reidsville Police Department and drop it in that box. And our evidence property specialist will ensure that those drugs are properly handled and destroyed. That's one way. That is the preferred way. So as citizens, let's make sure that we go through our medicine cabinets. One, make sure they're secure and locked away from our smaller children and those who should not have access to it by discarding those drugs or keeping them in a safe place. But then two, if you can't get here to the drop box, there's a new way that we have. It's been around for a while, but we were fortunate. You know, we're blessed. And one of our community partners through the Rockingham County Opioid Task Force, Mr. Pruitt, was able to help us get some Deterra packets, the kits. I don't know if y'all can see that. But what this is a kit, whereas it's a deactivator of drugs, where you take your old or expired medication you don't need anymore, and you pour it inside this bag and the chemical inside of it, and you shake it up. And that neutralizes the drug. Then you just properly take the drug that's inside the bag with the chemical mixed with it, and then just discard it in the trash. So we have around 150 of these packets here at the Reidsville Police Department. So if we come across an individual who wants to know, hey, officer, how can we get rid of our old medication? Then the officer will make sure that one of these packets is delivered to them, or they can come out of the Reidsville Police Department and pick up one of these packets. And one of my administrative staff will give it to them. So those are two ways that if you have drugs that you need to get rid of, old drugs, expired medication you don't need anymore, one, our drop box, or two, one of these Deterra packets that we can get sent to your home, or just come by anytime, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and pick up one. It's free of charge, no cost. You can get one of these packets to discard those drugs.
That is amazing. And I'm just thankful to hear that there are so many ways that people can get help or can get rid of drugs in their homes, and we're very thankful for you. Chief, we have run out of time, so if there is anything else that you want to add, I'd love for you to add any additional comments if we've left anything out.
You know, I just want to speak to our loved ones that's listening to your show. Is please, if you see changes in behavior or just mood changes in one of your loved ones, don't dismiss it. Take it seriously. Sit down, talk with them. And if you suspect a loved one is suffering from some form of addiction, please reach out to one of our service providers here in Rockingham County and get them help. They need you. Many times they need that support. They need their loved ones to be that support for them to help get them back on the right track. So, and if you need information on who our service providers are here in Rockingham County, please reach out to my office, and I'll be more than happy to give you one of these packets that have all of our service providers in here that will get you on a number to call to help get linked up with one of those service providers.
Thank you so much, Chief. I really appreciate you being on the show today. And tell everybody your non-emergency line, how they can get in touch with your office.
Oh, yes. Call me, my office directly at 336-347-2302. That's my direct number to my office here, or 336-349-1010, and that will take you down to our main number downstairs at the Reidsville Police Department.
Yes, sir. Well, we appreciate you so much. Thank you for doing everything that you do for the city of Reidsville and to protect our citizens and our business and our community. And it is always a pleasure to speak with you.
Likewise, thank you for having me on your show.
Yes, sir. All right, folks, that is it for the Reidsville Chamber of Commerce News and Views. As always, you can find us in the heart of downtown Reidsville, 140 South Scale Street. You can call us at 336-349-8481, and you can find us on our Facebook pages, the Reidsville Chamber and the Reidsville Visitor Center. And that's it for today. I'm Diane Sawyer with the Reidsville Chamber. We'll see you soon.